Imagine that 2,000 years ago, someone correctly predicted the position of every observable planet in the sky by the end of 2024. The possibility of this happening is extremely small, but the Book of Revelation seems to describe the future sky without the need for telescopes, mathematics, or computers. We'll explore more than 10 signs from the Book of Revelation that are likely to appear in the sky later this year, including images of the 4 Horsemen of Revelation. The probability that a person like St. John, the author of the Book of Revelation, would accurately describe a specific night from 2,000 years ago based on intuition alone is much more difficult than winning the lottery and being struck by lightning at the same time. Consider an interesting thing: mathematics to simulate the motion of the planets was only developed in the 17th century, more than 1,600 years after the Book of Revelation was written. However, it seems that St. John received these prophetic knowledge during his exile on the island of Patmos. In particular, there are prophecies that determine the date when these signs will appear, which we cannot help but be amazed. There are at least 5 independent prophecies from verifiable historical events, all pointing to 2024. Many prophecies have been fulfilled through historical milestones, creating credibility for what we are exploring. Other prophets have pointed to specific days of the year, emphasizing that if anyone has doubts about the existence of God or the accuracy of the Bible, they need only look at these signs, according to Revelation 19:10. The essence of prophecy is to bear witness to Jesus, which is clear evidence of his presence. If his word can predict the position of the stars on October 9th, then we certainly need to take seriously what the Bible says about the coming judgment. In addition, the prophetic book of Zechariah also describes weapons of mass destruction, possibly nuclear missiles, and this may be the fiery judgment predicted in the Bible. Will this happen this year? If so, we should admire the magical signs in the sky before it's too late. With at least 5 independent prophecies pointing to 2024 from multiple biblical books, each prophecy is interpreted alongside biblical passages and historical evidence. This is a time for us to reflect and learn more deeply about what is happening around us. The 5th prophecy indicates that 2024 is a combination of many small prophecies scattered throughout the Bible, in parables that say that Jesus will return in 2,000 years and will reign for 1,000 years. Jesus left the earth in 31 AD and will return to reign around 2000, making 2024 the beginning of a 7-year tribulation before his return. These prophecies also point to 2024 from 6 independent and well-known historical events, verifiable from the Bible and historical sources. These events include the crossing of the Jordan River in 1406 BC, the fall of Jerusalem in 598 BC, under King Nebuchadnezzar, the crucifixion of Jesus in 31 AD, the construction of the Temple of the Rock in 692 AD, the order to rebuild Jerusalem in 1535, and the founding of Israel in 1948. Half of these events were predicted hundreds, if not thousands of years before they occurred. The 4th prophecy has indicated that 2024 is the fig tree generation. Jesus said that the generation that saw Israel become a nation would not pass away before everything he said became a reality. In Psalm 90, human life expectancy is described as 80 years, ending with toil and grief, after which we will fly away. The fig tree refers to Israel, and Israel became a nation in May 1948. If 80 years from 1948 is 2028, then the 7-year tribulation period will begin in the fall of 2024. The 2nd prophecy we discover comes from the book of Daniel, chapter 12, in which the author refers to the number of years from the cessation of daily sacrifices in 598 BC to the event of abomination, causing desolation in the midst of the tribulation. If we add 1,295 years to 598 BC, we get to 692 AD, year of the construction of the stone dome located on the most sacred site of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. We believe that this is the abomination of desolation that Daniel mentioned, and that this event will occur another 1,335 years later. The Bible verse in Matthew 24:15 also says, "So when you saw the abomination of the desolation that Daniel prophesied stood in the holy place," pointed out that the location of this abomination was at the Temple Mountain. If we add 1,335 years from 692 AD, we will reach 2028, the time in the middle of the 7-year tribulation that is predicted to begin in the fall of 2024. At that time, Uranus, the Greek name means sky or heaven, will be very close to Earth, about 4 degrees in the sky, which is about 8 times the width of the Moon from the Seven Sisters cluster. This is the closest position Uranus can approach in its orbit. Only takes place for 2 consecutive years in each 84-year cycle. So after 2025, we won't see this phenomenon repeat until 2108. In Revelation 4:3 it says, "And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby." A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. This could be interpreted as having a sardine-like object appear in the stars. The last location John saw before the vision was the Golden Gate in the constellation of Taurus, where Jupiter will appear later this year. Sardine rocks are orange in color with creamy veins, which look amazingly similar to Jupiter. The telescope powerful enough to observe Jupiter was only invented in 1700, after the Book of Revelation was written, which in itself was a miraculous prophecy. Jupiter only passes through this Golden Gate once every 42 years, so for most people, this is a rare event that can only happen once in a lifetime. Jupiter's movement through this gate, after stopping on the 8th Feast of Tabernacles, occurs only once every 15,000 years. From the end of 2024, Mars will begin to move in the opposite direction in the Gemini constellation area and back towards the twin star after exactly 5 months. Mars only goes retrograde in Gemini every 16 years, making this event even rarer when it begins in the season of a solemn festival that only takes place every 5,000 years. In Revelation 16:17-19, it is mentioned that the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the throne, saying, "It is done." Then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on earth, so tremendous was the quake. The great city split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. God remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. At the end of 2024, Saturn will be at the center of the water flowing from the constellation Aquarius. Not only is Saturn in the water, but it also enters the opposite phase and will come to a complete stop in the sky, then turn in the opposite direction under the water about 40 days after that fateful day. Saturn's water stop occurs only every 75 years, and it passes through the region every 30 years. This year, Saturn entered the water at the time of the total solar eclipse at the beginning of the year, and left the water at the eclipse of April 8th. This can be interpreted as a warning of the coming judgment when Saturn returns into the water that coincides with the blood lunar eclipse, followed by a solar eclipse exactly 7 days before the solemn festival. Thereby, Saturn can be considered the perfect symbol of the great Babylon thrown into the waters of the sky and as a symbol of the falling judgment. We have already discussed the 6 main planets in the sky, including the Moon, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. However, there are still many other signs that the Book of Revelation has described will occur on this day. In Revelation 12, there is talk of a strange omen in heaven, a huge red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its head. Its tail sweeps 1/3 of the stars in the sky and throws them to the ground. The dragon stands in front of the woman who is about to give birth to swallow the baby as soon as it is born. This child will rule the nations with an iron rod and be taken to the throne of God, Revelation 12:3-5. When Jupiter stood at the door in Jerusalem, it was still October 8th in the United States. NASA predicts that a meteor shower named Draconis will appear right above the constellation Draco, a giant red dragon with a nose of a giant red star. Draco's tail extends about 120 degrees, or 1/3 of the sky, and it stands in front of the constellation Virgo. Above Draco is the constellation Corona Borealis with 7 stars like a crown. In particular, astronomers predict a reappearance nova event at Corona Borealis, creating an 8th star around October. We will have to wait and see if it happens at the appointed time. The birth of the sun is a reference to the prophecy in Isaiah 66, which speaks of the earth giving birth to a nation in the blink of an eye, which may refer to the highly anticipated rapture event, which occurred just before judgment falls. Isaiah 66 mentions the noise from the city, the trumpet from the temple, the voice of God judging his enemies. Before she was in pain, she had given birth. Before the pain hit, she gave birth to a son. In Isaiah 66, it is said that she gave birth, and this event took place at the time of the Draconis meteor shower, which takes place every year in October. However, this coincidence only takes place on the same solemn festival every 7 years. The fact that the meteor shower coincides with the festival and all the other signs that appear this year makes one think that this may be part of God's supernatural time plan. Now, let's continue with the 4 horsemen of Revelation described in Revelation chapter 6. Revelation 6:2 says of the first horse, "Behold, a white horse appeared, and the rider had a bow, he was given a crown, and he went forth to conquer to conquer. On this day, the moon is in the constellation of Sagittarius, the image of half man and half horse, holding a bow and arrow. In particular, the moon is at the right tip of the arrow and at the same angle to the bow, while the moon's phase resembles a bright white bow. The constellation of Sagittarius also comes with the constellation Corona Australis, like the crown that Revelation describes. This phenomenon occurs only once every 7 years, and this coincidence is very consistent with the symbol of the white horse. Next was the second horseman, the black horse. Revelation 6:5 says, "I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Right on the constellation of Sagittarius is the constellation Libra, which symbolizes a scale. The Greek word used in Revelation to refer to scale is the word for the constellation Libra. Venus, the second planet in the solar system, is located right in the middle of the two scales of Libra. The number 2 symbolizes division, like light and darkness, white and black, which is very suitable to represent the black horse. Venus is also known as the morning star. In 2 Peter 1:19 it says, "We also have the prophetic message as something completely reliable, and you will do well to pay attention to it, as to a light shining in a dark place, until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts." The appearance of the Venus light in the dark is the perfect image for the black horse. Revelation 6:2-4 says, "I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on quest. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, 'Come then.' Another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword." The planet that represents the red horse is Mars, the famous red planet. On this day, Mars is located right in the center of the constellation Gemini, in the belly or hand of Pollux, one of the 2 main stars of the constellation Gemini. Although the second night mentioned in Apocalypse, in this analysis Mars is placed behind the dark horse because it represents one of the 2 famous brothers, the warriors. The constellation Gemini is often considered a symbol for the brothers Castor and Pollux, but according to some other legends, the pair also represents Apollo and Heracles. In legend, Heracles was presented with a golden sword by the goddess Athena, which was suitable as a symbol of the great sword that the red horseman carried. This suggests that the word sword in this context may be related to nuclear weapons. Mars, the 4th planet in the solar system, also represents the 4th night of the apocalypse, the rider on a pale horse. From October 9th, Mars begins to move in the opposite direction in the Gemini region, returning to Apollo Aldebaran after exactly 5 months. Mars moves in the opposite direction in the constellation of Gemini only once every 16 years and begins this process in the solemn month of the festival, which takes place once every 5,000 years. Finally, Revelation 6:8 says, "Of the 4th horse I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth." Apollo is often depicted with the harp, shield and bow and arrow, having special power in hell. According to legend, anyone who is hit by Apollo will be exiled to hell. Apollo could use bows and arrows to spread plague and calamity on mankind, causing death and destruction. Revelation 9:2, 10-11 also says of Apollo their power was to cause pain to men for 5 months, and they had a king who was an angel of the bottomless abyss. His name in Greek is Apollyon. The bottomless abyss is a symbol of death and hell, associated with the pale horse. The connection between Apollyon's painful years and the years in which Mars moves in the opposite direction, marking the 4th night, is impressive. Both horsemen wielded swords, while Mars, the 4th planet, represented the god of war and was the perfect symbol of destruction. Just in front of the constellation Gemini is the constellation of the unicorn, a symbol for the last night with the great sword or horn, completing the picture of the 4 horsemen of Revelation with the last horseman on a pale horse. We have already discussed the 4 horsemen of Revelation along with the moon, Venus and Mars, located in the constellation Centaurus, half man, half horse, along with the 2 horsemen symbolized by a pair of Gemini standing on a unicorn. But the book of Revelation says much more about the signs in the sky by the end of 2024. Now, having explored each part of the signs, let's put it all together. Look at Jupiter, a human-like symbol, and the ruby, standing still in the sky for half an hour of silence at the Golden Gate of the zodiac. Here Jupiter stands in front of the 7 lampstands of the 7 sisters, the constellation Pleiades, and these sisters are associated with Uranus, the symbol of heaven. After that, Jupiter enters the east gate and returns to the same path. Next were the 4 horsemen, starting with the white horseman wearing a crown and carrying the moon shaped like a bow. Next is the black knight, where Venus reigns, holding the scale and shining in the dark night. Then the red knight, symbolized by Mars, carrying a large sword. And finally, the pale blue knight depicted by the constellation Gemini. Next we meet Saturn, the symbol of Babylon the Great, with its rings like a great mill thrown into the sea, pouring fury into the sky. It all takes place when a meteor shower from the constellation of Draco, the red dragon, stretches across the sky, throwing stars to the ground. When a nation is born in a day, the dragon stands with a 7-star crown on its head, in the presence of the constellation Virgo. Finally, the sun rose as a groom holding the hand of Virgo, who was dressed in bright and pure linen, at 6:04 a.m. in Jerusalem. All celestial bodies that can be seen by the naked eye appear in a symbolic way, creating the picture that the book of Revelation described thousands of years ago. Designing such an alignment manually is a big challenge, but it's clearly all already in the sky. Now that we have a better understanding of the sign, let's take a closer look at the judgment that is coming. The book of Revelation, chapter 5, begins by describing a scroll with writing on both sides. I saw on the right hand of him seated on the throne a scroll written on both sides. Revelation 5:1-2. This can be interpreted as a reference to the book of prophets Jeremiah chapter 5, which describes a flying scroll, and I lifted up my eyes and saw a scroll flying between heaven and earth, Jeremiah 5:1-2. This image of the scroll flying in the sky between heaven and earth is similar to the context in Revelation of stars and angels. The angel asked, "What do you see?" And I replied, "I saw a flying scroll 20 yards long and 10 yards wide." Jeremiah 5:2. If calculated in terms of this size, the width of the scroll, its circumference, would create a diameter of about 2.4 meters and a height of 11 meters, numbers that are very close to the size of modern nuclear missiles. The book of Jeremiah goes on to describe a symbolic image of the fire. "I will make it go away," Almighty God declares, "and it will enter into the house of the thief, into the house of the swearer, and will burn the wood and the stone in it." Jeremiah 5:4. This is a fierce fire, and the similarity between Babylon and the great mill thrown into the sea further reinforces this image. With these details, we can see that the image in the book of Jeremiah is most likely alluding to modern weapons of destruction, namely nuclear bombs. The story of this scroll, the scorching flames and the destruction of houses with wood and stone, is very similar to how a nuclear bomb works. This similarity leads us to the conclusion that biblical descriptions of Revelation events may be prophetic images of nuclear disasters in the near future. And if you've really watched this far, with God's blessing, share it with your loved ones so they can know about this as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to give us more motivation to create more videos about the Bible. We hope to see you again in the next video. May God bless you and protect you at all times. Amen.